Jets head coach Robert Saleh spoke to the media on Thursday and gave us some information on the team's search for a new offensive coordinator. Jets team owner Woody Johnson also spoke to the media on Thursday, and he said a bunch of Woody Johnson-esque things. We'll talk about all this and more on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, January 13th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button where you are watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Well, it's Friday the 13th, so I wish you luck as you try and get through this day. This weekend, the NFL playoffs begin. There are 14 teams still who have Super Bowl dreams. 12 of them will be in action. The top seeds in each conference, the Chiefs and the Eagles, have a bye week and automatically advance to next weekend's divisional round. For the other 18 teams, you're trying to figure things out as you head into the offseason. Some teams have more to figure out than others. There are some teams that are looking for a head coach. There are some teams that are keeping everybody intact, and the Jets fall somewhere in the middle here because, of course, earlier this week, they announced, or the news broke, that Michael LaFleur was not going to return to the team in 2023. And yesterday, the Jets held a press conference. It was not entirely unexpected because Woody Johnson had indicated that he would speak late in the week about the team's 2022 season. Robert Saleh also did address the press. It was an unscheduled press conference. And, you know, in these postseason press conferences, you have to kind of separate the cliches from the actual useful information. And it tends to be the case in these press conferences that like 90 to 95% of the talk is cliches, but occasionally you get a useful nugget or two. And I think the Jets gave us a few things that were interesting in yesterday's press conferences. And for me, I think the number one takeaway is Robert Saleh talked about the search for a new offensive coordinator. And Saleh said that he's going to cast a wide net, and he put the time frame for a hire around a month. He said, he did not explicitly say, I'm going to take a month, but he said over the next month or so, we're really going to look hard at offensive coordinator candidates. And I think if you were looking for a deadline, it probably would be about a month from now. I would imagine the Jets would want to have an offensive coordinator in place by the Senior Bowl, because that's a point where you really want to know what your scheme is, what your scheme values in players at certain positions. I think that would probably help with the scouting process. And the Jets obviously will want an offensive coordinator in place as they try and address the quarterback position. And Saleh indeed indicated that the offensive coordinator is going to have a say in the quarterback the Jets eventually get, which is what you would expect. That usually is the case when you're looking for a new quarterback. The offensive coordinator is going to have a degree of input. I think that the interesting takeaway from this comment, though, is Saleh does not have a guy in mind. And so he also doesn't seem to be married to pretty much putting in a clone of the 2021 and 2022 playbook. Seems like he's open to new approaches, and that's not necessarily the most uncommon thing in the world. When a head coach is hired, and I think this is true with any of us. I mean, it's true when I'm hired for a job. It's true when you're hired for a job, especially if it's a job you really want. And if it's a job you've coveted for a long time, the way assistant coaches covet NFL head coaching jobs, you've usually thought through what you would do when you get to the top job, when you get the job you want. And when somebody's hired as an NFL head coach for the first time, they have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you probably aren't going to get through the interview process. So you implement that plan, and typically what happens, after the first 2 years or so is you see there were aspects of your plan that really worked, and there were some things that really did not go as you were expecting them to. And I think one of the biggest challenges as a coach is adjusting when your original plan does not work out the way you were expecting it to. And this is one of the things that I think really trips up a lot of coaches, because you see a lot of coaches in this league get off to very hot starts. I mean, I can name you the list of coaches who made the playoffs their first year as a head coach. It includes Rich Kotite. It includes Adam Gase. It includes Ben McAdoo. I mean, there are some unbelievably bad coaches who had a successful first season because they came in and they implemented their plan. Then the league caught up to them, and they had to adjust, and they were not capable of adjusting. So I think once you reach the end of that second season, typically what happens is hopefully some of the plan has worked, and I think for Saleh some of the plan has worked. But you're inevitably going to see that there were things that did not work out exactly as you wanted them to. And I think Mike LaFleur is one of those situations. Mike LaFleur, I think Saleh had an idea of how the LaFleur offense was going to work out, and it really did not match his expectations. And I think that was a big reason the change was eventually made. So now Saleh needs to figure out what he wants on offense, because what he initially wanted on offense did not work. So what this tells me is that he's taking the time, and he really is going to think through what he wants out of the offensive side of the ball. And that's always a challenge. I think one of the biggest issues a lot of coaches have is that they come up really on one side of the ball for the most part. There are a few coaches who become head coaches and are very well-rounded and have worked on both sides of the ball. But a lot of coaches have an expertise on one side, but they don't really know a whole lot about the other. And the good coaches eventually kind of figure out the other side. They at least gain a working knowledge of the other side. They may not be experts. You're always going to know more about one side of the ball than the other, but you get enough of a working knowledge to understand what you want. And I think another aspect coaches really struggle in is complementary football, where they don't really understand how the offense and defense work together. And to Saleh's credit, I think in Miami, the Jets' game plan did feature complementary football, where they were playing a very low-risk game plan, trying to win a tight game. Now, I don't think it was a good plan. I think that the specifics of the plan left a lot to be desired, but I think that it's encouraging to see at least Saleh understands the concept of complementary football. And I think, he has to figure out what he wants in an offense. Bill Belichick's a guy who comes from the defensive side of the ball. And I think one of the reasons New England, and now the number one reason New England has been able seamlessly through the years to make changes to their offensive coaching staff is Tom Brady. A lot easier when you have arguably the greatest quarterback of all time calling plays for you. You can change up coordinators left and right, and it probably won't make that big of a difference. But a secondary reason New England has been able to navigate changes on their offensive coaching staff so well is they don't hire coaches to come in and implement a new playbook. Any coach who's running the New England offense is running the Belichick playbook. Belichick has his own playbook, and over the course of time, he's developed a knowledge of, again, a working knowledge of how the offensive side of the ball should run, what he wants out of his offense. And that's something Robert Saleh needs to figure out. Now, Saleh could have taken, I think, two different approaches to this. He possibly could have had a guy in mind. He could have known exactly what he wanted. Maybe it was even a carbon copy of Mike LaFleur. Maybe it was a situation where he just felt LaFleur was not implementing the offense he wanted to run efficiently. That's not the case. What Saleh is essentially saying, I think, is he's really going to spend some time thinking about what he values in an offense, the way he wants his offense to run, and that's what's going to make the ultimate decision on who he hires as the offensive coordinator. So I think that was actually pretty informative what Saleh said, and it was not something I was necessarily expecting from him, and it's not a bad thing. I don't think I don't think what the coach gives you necessarily tells you a lot about the coach. It just tells you what he's comfortable revealing to the public. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. I think it's just information that we received. Now, Robert Saleh was not the only person who spoke to the media on Thursday. Jets owner Woody Johnson also spoke to the media. And as we continue on this Friday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast, I'll give you some of I don't think there were any highlights, but I'll give you some of the interesting nuggets that Woody gave us as we head into the offseason here. That's as we continue this episode of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 is all about the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experience to help you achieve your goals. I don't know whether Robert Saleh is going to use LinkedIn Jobs to fill the offensive coordinator job for the Jets, but it's very simple. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. You can identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market. These are protein bars, but they taste like candy bars because they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. We just got through the holidays, and maybe your goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. Well, then you got to try Built Bar. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. They are so delicious, you will not believe that they're actually good for you. They're perfect for your New Year's resolution. And they come in unbelievable flavors. They got churro, they got peanut butter brownie, they've got coconut almond. And I mean, I don't know how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they're also healthy. They're only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get your box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Well, you can still do that, but now you can also pick them up at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your local Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with one of their new hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. Jets made an offensive coordinator change this week. Mike LaFleur is out. We don't know who's in yet. Robert Saleh indicated it could take a couple weeks. Saleh even indicated maybe it'll take a month or so. Jets probably won't want to have their new coordinator in by the Senior Bowl. I would say that that's probably an unofficial deadline for the team. Now, there have been rumors swirling that perhaps Woody Johnson had a role in the Jets changing their offensive coordinator. And, if you're a Jets fan, and you've been a Jets fan for a number of years, I don't need to tell you why Woody Johnson getting involved in football decisions would be a bad move. Even if you agree with the decision to move on from Mike LaFleur, you don't really want Woody Johnson as part of these decisions, because Woody Johnson has not really shown any sort of restraint when it comes to football decisions. And even when he's kind of behind a decision that works out for the Jets, he doesn't know when to back off. There's pretty much two stages of Woody Johnson. There's Woody Johnson when he's involved, and Woody Johnson when he's letting the football people run the operation. Now, for the Jets over the past decade plus, Woody Johnson letting the football people run the operation, unfortunately, has not produced very good results. The problem is that the only thing that's been worse than Woody Johnson letting the football people run the operation is Woody Johnson taking charge and making decisions himself. And that could be the situation we're in right now. Now, Woody did speak with the press yesterday, and he indicated that he was not part of the decision-making tree, which is one of his favorite phrases, firing Mike LaFleur, and then he immediately contradicted himself because he said he made his feelings known to Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, or he made his feelings known to whoever the decision-makers were about what needed to happen on the offense. So within the span of a sentence, he contradicted himself because he said he had nothing to do with the decision, but he made his feelings known. Now, to be fair to Woody, it's possible he doesn't realize that when you're the owner of the team and you're making your feelings known, that has an impact on the decision. He may not even realize that, but of course it does. And, it's not even really about this decision. LaFleur could go. I don't really have any strong feelings about, LaFleur should have stayed. I think LaFleur certainly had enough flaws that you could justify moving on from him. The concern is not really about this decision. The concern is whether this is the first step in Woody re-engaging and Woody being very involved in the team's decision-making. Because, ultimately, I don't know whether Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh is going to work out for this team. They've both shown some good things, but frankly, they've both shown some flaws. Some flaws that ultimately could make them unsuccessful with this team. The thing is, these are guys who at least have a football background. They at least, know something about the game. They know something about the league. They know something about building in the league. Even if they're not successful, these are guys who have an expertise in it. I would rather go with them. I'd rather go with their vision than with Woody, because Woody just really does not know anything about first of all, I don't get the impression he knows a lot about what's going on the field, X's and O's wise. But I think he knows even less about how to build a successful organization. There are some owners who actually can be a benefit when you hear their voice. There are some owners whose input can actually be valuable in a situation where you're deciding whether to keep the offensive coordinator or leave them. These are owners with experience, owners with knowledge of the game, owners who are interested in studying the game. Woody Johnson has never shown himself to be any of these things. So it's not really about Mike LaFleur. It's more, is this step one for Woody getting himself more involved with the football operations of the team? Because frankly, nothing good can come from that. And you could end up making a lot of bad decisions. You could end up making a lot of bad personnel moves, a lot of short-sighted decisions. And so I think it has to be a concern. I'm not ready to sound the alarm bell at this point, but I really did not like hearing from. It's something that's been in the media for like the last couple of weeks that he wasn't happy and he was going to demand changes. And yeah, fine, you may be happy with this one. I can promise you, if he keeps making decisions, you're not going to be happy with what happens in the future. So you hope he backs off, but I think it has to be a point of concern that this owner is getting involved, because this is not an owner who offers value. There's some owners who offer value. There's some owners who, I kept seeing yesterday, well, if some other owner said this, it wouldn't be a big deal. Yeah, you're right, because some other owner can actually offer some insight and be constructive. This owner cannot. That's the difference. It's this specific owner who, every organization has a good structure for them. The Jets' best structure is going to be Woody Johnson having nothing to do with football decisions. Now, Woody also talked about, the quarterback position and generated some headlines. He said that he's willing to pay, whatever the Jets want to pay, whatever Joe Douglas wants to pay to bring in an expensive quarterback this offseason. He also referred to the roster as loaded, which, I don't know that it's necessarily a loaded roster. I think it's an improved roster over where we were in the Mike McCagnon days, but I don't know that I'd say it's loaded. That generated a lot of buzz. I don't know that it really deserved all the attention it got, because the Jets have always been a team that's been willing to spend to the cap, and quarterback's going to be expensive, but there's never been any issues with the Jets paying for players. There have been issues with the Jets maybe being cheap in other areas, but bringing in veteran players for big money has never really been an issue with this franchise under Woody's ownership. Woody also indicated that he gave us some more football expertise, that he felt the Jets did not develop Zach Wilson properly, that they should have had a veteran come in. Well, it's great for you to say that now. Where was this 2 years ago? But again, this is the problem, is that Woody doesn't know when to step in. Woody's stepping in 2 years ago to say maybe we should get a good owner may have suggested a few years ago when Zach Wilson was a rookie. We should get we should maybe have some insurance from a veteran quarterback. No, we don't get this. We get this after the fact that we should have done this 2 years ago. Well, thank you for that insight, Woody. So not a lot of value comes from the owner. You never expect a lot of value coming from the owner when he does a press conference. But some signs that have me a little concerned. I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to state that I'm panicked over it, but something to keep an eye on if the Jets start making some short-sighted moves going forward, because ownership's turning up the pressure. It could cause some problems for this team. So it'll definitely be one of the things to watch this offseason. Now, the Jets, in addition to getting rid of Mike LaFleur, the Jets also announced some other staff changes yesterday on the offensive side of the ball. And as we close out this Friday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about some of the coaches who will not be returning in the year 2023. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by BetOnline. It's Super Wild Card Weekend. It's the third Super Wild Card Weekend. 2 years ago, the NFL expanded its playoffs to have 7 teams in each conference. So that brought Wild Card Weekend from 4 games to 6 games. Things get underway tomorrow afternoon. There are 2 games on Saturday. There are 3 games on Sunday. And then there's even a Monday night game. And even though the Jets aren't in, you can make some money if you want to lay some money down on the games. You should know that betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to basketball to hockey, they've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by TurboTax. For the Jets, it's offensive coordinator hiring season, but tax season for all of us is coming up. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleeps through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. It feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax. Full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. We're talking about some information that came out of Robert Saleh and Woody Johnson's press conferences yesterday. Now, in addition to Mike LaFleur, and I think this was expected after the Jets announced LaFleur was not coming back, there are going to be some other coaching staff changes on the offensive side of the ball. And none of these are that shocking when you think about the context of the moves. First of all, quarterbacks coach Rob Calabrese will not return. How much of it was his fault, I don't know, but that's just always going to happen. There are two guys who get fired when the young quarterback does not develop. One is the offensive coordinator, and two is the quarterback's coach. And I don't think the Jets could have brought Calabrese back, given the situation with Zach Wilson. I don't know that it's entirely fair, but the coaching profession is just kind of unfair to begin with. You get fired for things that are beyond your control. I mean, could another quarterback coach have developed Zach Wilson? I don't really know. On the other hand, you have guys like Adam Gase and Nathaniel Hackett who essentially got head coaching jobs because they were in the right place at the right time, and they ended up coaching a Hall of Fame quarterback who was already great at the time they started coaching them. So the coaching profession's unfair. It cuts both ways. Calabrese could end up in a situation that's much better with a good quarterback and get a promotion he may not deserve. Well, he got fired, and I'm not sure he entirely deserved it. I mean, I don't know how you were supposed to succeed with this group of quarterbacks when we're talking Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco, but Rob Calabrese is out. So is offensive line coach John Benton. To me, this actually is more unfair than Rob Calabrese, because there's actually an argument that Calabrese, had a role in Zach Wilson's failure. Maybe not a huge role, but you can at least argue that, he should have done better with Zach Wilson. I have no idea what John Benton was supposed to do with this offensive line this year. I've said it over the course of the season over and over and over. It's one thing to have to play a bunch of backups, but it's even worse, I think, when you have to constantly shuffle guys in and out. You have guys changing positions on the line all year. You have new guys coming in every week because somebody gets healthy, somebody gets hurt. Jets had like 9 to 10 different offensive line alignments this year. No offensive line coach could have success with that. First of all, the caliber of player wasn't good enough, but beyond the caliber of player, offensive line is a spot where chemistry matters a whole lot. And people have pointed out all year how guys were going unblocked. Well, that's a chemistry issue. That's because you don't know what the guy next to you is going to do. And when there's a new guy next to you every week, it's difficult to figure it out. Now, the reason this change was made, I don't think it was necessarily a performance thing, but typically, and this was true with Benton because he actually had the title run game coordinator, the offensive line coach usually has a big role in constructing the run game. He's the guy who designs a lot of the run play blocking assignments, and on run plays, blocking assignments are essentially that's essentially the entire design of the play. So when you change an offensive coordinator, it's pretty common to change your offensive line coach. And I think that's one of the misconceptions, is that you're just coaching the offensive line. On a lot of teams, the offensive line coach is also kind of de facto in charge of the run game. And he's the guy who orchestrates it and designs it. So when you bring in a new offensive coordinator, he's going to want his own guy. And I think it's only fair to let an offensive coordinator bring in his own guy to design the run game and coach up the offensive line. So again, the coaching profession is kind of unfair. Do I think it's fair that John Benton got fired? No, but that's just the case. When the offensive coordinator goes, everybody else goes. It shows you. I mean, I think this shows you just how damaging it can be, just how much of a role a young quarterback can have. I mean, a young quarterback can drastically alter careers, and it shows you how damaging it is when the young quarterback does not pan out. I mean, you look at all the firings that have happened on the offensive staff. And really, you can trace it back to Zach Wilson not panning out, and maybe the coaching staff had some degree of culpability for that. But I don't know that there really was that much they could have done differently to help Zach Wilson succeed. And the Jets also hinted, they did not explicitly say it, but they gave the impression Miles Austin, the wide receivers coach, was also dismissed. Now, Austin was suspended late in the season. He has at least a 1-year suspension for violating the NFL's gambling policy. Now, he was not betting on NFL games. He apparently was betting on another sport, and apparently that's a violation of the NFL's gambling policy. And, the NFL, the league that, flashes these gambling commercials nonstop during games, and even which shows you odds in games, is taking issue with Miles Austin gambling. It's kind of unusual from the standpoint that the position coach of a group that has a guy who could be the rookie of the year, and Garrett Wilson could end up being the rookie of the year, usually doesn't get fired. But it sounds like this may just be because he's not going to be with the team for most of next season anyway, so the Jets may just be looking to make a clean break. But it's kind of interesting because even though the Jets have had some failures developing young receivers, usually you would not fire the position coach of the rookie of the year because that shows you he's doing something right. But it sounds like Miles Austin's not going to be coaching the Jets for most of next season anyway. It sounds like the Jets are looking for a new wide receiver as coach. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you are watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. These things help the channel out and help other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy the football action. We'll be back next week to talk more Jets.